City Council Committee on Ordinances and Legislation will now come to order. Madam Clerk?
Councilor Kadim? Councilor Dion?
Here.
Councilor Lee?
Here.
Councilor Pereira?
Here.
Chair Liberty LaBelle.
Here. Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived by those present, and are deemed acknowledged and permissible. First item is citizens' input, and we have 2 emails that we received. Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman and members of the Committee on Ordinances and Legislation. I would really love to be there in person today. However, I had a prior volunteering engagement at 5 o'clock I had to attend. At Tuesday's council meeting, it appeared a few councilors were upset at my citizens' input. Perhaps is too demanding for a composting program that has not even been discussed in committee yet. That is a very fair critique. I would love to see a composting program in Fall River, one that is complete and will help bring down the cost of trash without overburdening the taxpayer. As one citizen, I just want to see the following items and questions discussed and solved today in regards to the composting program. What department will maintain responsibility of the program, or would a new department need to be started? Will the city have drop-off and pickup services, and how much would this cost the taxpayer? Will the city offer or eventually offer more than one option for a bin? Will there be instructions for composting on the city website, or even a campaign to boost the initiative? Will these bins require pay-as-you-throw trash bags? I hope these questions are discussed today, and I hope the city has a great composting program, as environmental issues are very important to me. And I cannot wait to watch a recording of this meeting when I'm available too. Respectfully submitted, Colin Dias. Please be advised that I have noticed that the mayor is proposing section 62-48 from generator of the trash to the property owner. This is unacceptable and unfair to property owners. The changing of this ordinance would place an undue burden on property owners, both locally and out of city, to police the trash generated by the tenants of their building or buildings. The city has never truly tried to enforce this ordinance as it currently stands, as it was too burdensome for the city employees to handle or perform. So the mayor wants to shift this responsibility to the property owner and generate another money grab for the city of Fall River. Property owners in the city of Fall River are already overburdened with increased water and sewer rates, increasing property taxes, and increasing fees for other services. So now the mayor wants to generate even more cash by fining property owners for an item that they cannot control or police. If the city could not or would not police the trash for this information, how can the city expect the property owners to do this? I ask that the changes proposed under section 62-48 be sent to the city council with a negative recommendation or with a leave to withdraw recommendation. I thank you for your time in this matter. Respectfully, CJ Ferry. That's everything that we have from citizens' input. I'd like to entertain a motion for taking items 8 and 9 out of order.
I'll make that motion.
Items 8 and 9 out of order.
Second.
Motion made by Council Pereira, seconded by Councilor Lee. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item 8 is traffic handicap parking that was referred on August 11th.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Motion to adopt has been made by Councilor Pereira, seconded by Councilor Dion. Any discussion?
Madam Chair, if I may, would you want an emergency
Want to do an
preamble?
emergency?
Yes.
Motion for an emergency preamble.
Yes. Motion to emergency preamble made by Councilor Pereira,
Second.
seconded by Councilor Dion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So voted. Item 9, we're striking out handicap parking spaces. Do I have a motion
to adopt.
Motion to adopt made by Councilor Pereira.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Lee. Any discussion? All in
I
favor?
would like to
Oh, I'm
discuss.
sorry. Go ahead.
I'm glad to see some of the handicap parking signs that are being taken down. And I don't know how Mrs. Ferreira is managing to do it, because people should be letting us know when they are no longer in use. But there's quite a number on here, so kudos to the traffic department. Thank you. With that, I yield.
Thank you. Anything further? All in favor?
Aye.
Still voted. Item 2 is a communication from the mayor and proposed ordinance requesting solid waste updates. It was referred February 25th, 2020. Dear Honorable Council members, during the budget preparation, we found that the following ordinance should be updated to reflect the following information. Section 62-2 is a housekeeping recommendation, as it includes language regarding the use of official city bags. The attached ordinance is requesting removal of the reference to the official city bag in both the definition section and Section C of the ordinance. Section 62-35 is a housekeeping recommendation, as the city no longer recycles shredded paper. Section C should be removed. Section 62-48 includes language regarding enforcement and disposition of fines. The attached ordinance recommendation is to change the enforcement from against the generator of the trash to the property owner. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, Mayor Paul Gutman.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Councilor Seat-
Counselor.
Yes.
I don't have a problem with Section 2, housekeeping, since we have no city bags, that should be stricken from the record. And I have no problem with Section 6235, because we no longer do shredded paper, so that would be removed. But I do have an issue with Section 6248. And I know that it's easier for the city, for the homeowner to be the one that's responsible. But if you look at the number of homes in Fall River that are owned by people from out of town, you know, and how often do they come into the city? I know, you know, the house at the corner of 18th Street, the woman that owns that is from Stoughton. And I've spoken to her. She comes down once a month to collect rents. So there's no way she's going to be there checking on their trash. Perhaps notifying the homeowner that there is an issue, giving them a notice, and the second time, the homeowner then needs to get their own trash service. But to charge the homeowner, if the city couldn't police what people were throwing out, I agree with Mr. Ferry's letter. How does the city expect homeowners to do it? I'm certainly not going to go down. I happen to own a 6-family. I'm not going to go down and go through the trash. I mean, maybe one of the things we can do on recycle bins is to put a photograph, a sticker with a picture of what can be recycled. People need an educational component. We've never given the educational component. And if it's easier to just go to the landlord, I disagree with that. If your city couldn't do it, how do you think landlords are going to do it?
Is Corporation
And I
Counsel-
get it, it's gonna be easier for you,
Corporation Counsel.
for the city,
He was here.
but I just don't think it's fair. That's just my take on it.
So, couple of things on that. So as
Sure.
far as it's just easier, for us, that's not necessarily the main point to the whole, change. I understand property owners, you know, feel the tax hit more so probably than other people. But in what we did originally, trying to identify the generator of, as you said, possibly a 6-family, a 5,
Right.
or 4, becomes very difficult. Unfortunately, not a lot of people want to own up when there's an issue. And we try to decipher where it came from, which unit in that building did it come from. And it got to the point where I actually had to have my compliance officers searching through bags, ripping them open. It wasn't healthy. They came across some things that were really nasty that they shouldn't be touching in the first place. And it became almost impossible to identify. So what we did do was as you said, we reached out to the property owners immediately, and we tried to get them to work with us to identify that particular individual, who is the violator in your property. And surprisingly enough, those homeowners were more than glad to come forward and help us identify that person. It didn't seem as though they said to us they couldn't figure out who did it. It was just, once we reached out, they were glad to let us know which one of the tenants did it. But then again, the problem still remains, how do we prove that it was that homeowner? That tenant or that resident. So it became almost impossible for us to get some of these citations to stick and actually follow them through to the end, where we would recoup that violation. And unless you have an ordinance where the outcome of these types of things are certain, People, if they can get away with it, they're going to continue to get away with it.
Could I just get a point of clarification, Mr. Perry? Was this when we were using the purple bags?
It's been from the beginning, yeah, since we started using the purple bags. Now, this relates to not only pay-as-you-throw, but also for recycling compliance.
So how many recycling compliance issues do you have?
Oh, it's one of our biggest problems. I mean, our contamination in recycling is historically anywhere from 30 to 40%.
Okay, 'cause I
so
know this was a big issue on who should be in charge of making sure that they were complying when we were using the pay-as-you-throw bags. I didn't know if it was still.
Yeah, recycling is
Using
also a
recycling.
huge problem, and I think we all know that. And part of the reason recycling is where it is, and the price of a per ton is where it is because of the market and what's happening worldwide. That's part of it. But we're in a tough position because our contamination rates are so high that if we were to go to another recycling end-use facility and try to barter a better deal to get our price lower, we may be able to get that price lower. We may be able to get a significantly lower price. But what happens is with certain facilities, your contamination percentages is what drives your overall cost. So to make things simple, if your base cost per ton for recycling is $50, they will give you a certain threshold, anywhere from 5 to 15%. Now, standard industry percentages would be 5. That's what we were with Casella at one point, and you know Casella well.
Casella would have been down here for
So-
20 years. We could have got rid of
No.
our recyclables for free, John.
No, I know, but that day unfortunately is come and gone. But
Yeah.
when we did have a relationship with Casella, and that's where we were bringing it, Casella actually upped our percentage threshold to be in non-compliance from 5 to 15 because there was such a realization that Fall River was never going to be able to get to 5%. So they said, well, we'll give you an extra 10% contamination. But when you hit that 15%, anything over that, it drives the price up. So if you're at 20%, your price goes from 50 to 60. If you're at 30%, your price goes from 60 to 70, and on and on. And then once you reach a certain threshold, I think our max was 35%. If you get to 35%, the entire load then became $220 a ton. And that's where our cost, that we were really getting hit. I agree with you wholeheartedly on the education piece, and that's why we're starting that. We sent out the flyers in the tax bills this year with recycling education in multiple languages. We've added some stuff to the website. We had gotten into the schools last year toward the end of the year and started to get in and trying to get the kids on board. We have plans on doing some public access TV spots to actually visually show people how to recycle. We've begun some small-scale initiatives, textile recycling, book recycling again, which had gone by the wayside. We're considering having a recycle drop-off at the DPW facility, which we haven't had since Pay-As-You-Throw came in. So there's a number of small-scale initiatives that we're already in the process of doing in order to get people, the compost that we're going to talk about later, that's another one. So anything we can pull out of our waste stream that's going to reduce that cost, the better. And when as to the point of, how do we expect the homeowner, the property owner to police those tenants? If the city couldn't do it, I know where you're coming from with that, but as we said the other night on the council floor, there's some 34,000 households in this city when you start looking at individual apartments and whatnot. We have 4 compliance officers at our height in compliance. When it breaks it down to a homeowner, that homeowner may have a half a dozen properties, may have 1 property. That's what they have to keep an eye on, is 6 properties, as opposed to 4 people trying to keep an eye on thousands or tens of thousands. So that's where it gets a little easier for the homeowner to be able to keep an eye on what their tenants are doing.
So as a homeowner, I should go through the trash,
No,
open up bags, and figure out what's in there.
It's
I
n-
just think that homeowners, I'll be honest with you, I think that we have homeowners in Fall River that are very responsible homeowners, and we have homeowners that come in, that buy property, and they just want as much as they can get for rent, and they're not responsible homeowners. I understand what you're saying. It was hard for you guys to go, and it's easier for a homeowner that owns 1, 2, 3, 6 properties versus the city with 4 compliance officers. How many do you have now?
Right now, I have 3.
Okay.
So we're hopefully going to be adding the 4th once, obviously, we see where the budget leads us. So I'm going to try to get us back to full complement, which was 4. Now, if you remember that again, and here's another piece of it, that division within DCM had been disbanded at one point.
Right.
So we were on the cusp of turning the corner and really doing some of these exciting things earlier on. But unfortunately, that never happened. So
But
now
even-
that we're back, we're picking that up where we left
But
off.
even when you were giving someone, a ticket, they had to pay a fine.
Sure.
They'd go to court, and what would the judge say? Slap them on the wrist. How much money did the city make?
We've only
having them?
collected, and I'd have to check with the clerk's office again to confirm, but we're probably somewhere around $1,500 in total
In
over all
total.
that time. But that also, a piece that plays into that, Counselor, is we not on any circumstance refuse to work with a homeowner. If we issue a violation and a citation, and that homeowner reaches out to us and understands, hey, look, it's tough for me to keep an eye on my tenants. Let me work with you guys to get this straightened out. We regularly work with them. We'll reduce the fine. We'll eliminate the fine that they got as long as we see that they're putting their best foot forward. Councilor Dion and I had this conversation briefly the other day where there are many, many, many more people in this city, as you said, that are doing the right thing.
That's right.
It's the ones that aren't. So all of those people that are doing the right thing won't have to worry about this piece. And if they're doing the right thing and they're not a repeat property, they won't be getting hit. And it's not a all or nothing. It's not, you got the citation, we're not willing to listen to what you have to say. We're always willing to work with them. No difference than the nuisance properties with the police department. Thousands of properties throughout the city. Police department doesn't have many issues with any of them. But those nuisance properties get slapped with that title for a reason. And some of these property owners within the city or absentee landlords are our biggest issue, just don't get it. And when they don't have to answer for it, when they can just point the finger at one of their tenants and tell the city, go figure it out, I mean, that to me isn't right either.
So why not, if you said, you have the name of the property owner, you say to the property owner, we have found that the trash that we're picking up has been contaminated. Please contact your tenants. If your tenants fail to do this, the city will no longer pick up your trash. You're going to have to get a private.
We can't.
Can you do that or no?
We're not allowed to do that, correct? We're not allowed to not pick up some.
Well, I mean, that's a slippery slope, Counselor. I think we could definitely leave things behind, but then that
Becomes
just,
a Board of Health issue.
It becomes
The
a
Board
board,
of
that
Health
becomes
issue
a,
gives you teeth in court.
right,
right?
right. So, and please, don't
That's
underestimate the fact of what we leave behind, we have to inevitably get because of that health
Right.
code issue, okay?
But if
So
it's a
that's
health-
doubling the work.
But if it's a health code issue, the health department has a lot more teeth than you do with trash.
Well, I think the health board issue would arise if it stays out there for a significant amount of time. That's what would end up being the issue. I mean, honestly, we are trying to get this under control. Part of the issue that everybody talks about with this type of stuff is enforcement. There's no enforcement. They keep saying there's no enforcement, there's no enforcement. Well, we are trying. But trying to go after the generator of it has become a serious issue. It's not something that we can really overcome without being able to have a specific responsible person on that property. And I'm sorry, there are thousands, tens of thousands of good apartment renters in this city, okay? But the ones that are doing the wrong thing just don't care. I could go after them and they don't care. It's not going to matter to them. It's not going to hurt them. If they never pay the fine and we never recoup it, how do we have a recourse to somebody who's renting an apartment? We can't attach anything to their taxes. We can't deny them, any of the significant things that they would need in order to get their attention. they're gonna get a letter in the mail, they're gonna get a citation, they're gonna put it in a drawer somewhere, and we're never gonna see that money. And to be honest, I'd be surprised if they even care.
When you said you got $1,500, is that from this fiscal year?
No, that's
or
all
since the
over.
program?
That's since the
Since
beginning,
program.
Council.
But
yeah.
when this came down with Flanagan through the Board of Health to do the bags and recycling, whatever, we talked about a need for an educational piece. Since Flanagan, you had Bob Correa, you had Sutter, you had Jaisel, and we're still not with that educational piece. Before any of this gets changed, I'd like to see an educational piece done. That would be my recommendation. There needs to be a strong educational component. Should have been done initially, not your fault or anyway, it should have been done. The state had a whole packet on how to implement this and what could have been done. I just think, okay, it's not a way for us to attach this, that, or, you know, attach somebody's taxes or what have you, but I'm not gonna go tell 6 people, this is how you recycle, this is what you recycle. Let's look at other things. How about putting a sticker on top of a barrel? Every barrel gets a sticker that shows what you can recycle in here.
Can I ask you a question, Council? What is it that would keep you from wanting to just explain to 6 people how to recycle correctly if you, as the owner, know, and you, as the owner, could help us as a city?
I would help you.
Yeah.
I would absolutely help you.
Like,
The ones that aren't
those
gonna
6
help you
conversations
are
that
the
can-
irresponsible
Agreed.
owners.
And that's what this would be.
You know,
That's
the
what, that's
irresponsible owners.
what this
what I
change
think.
is really intended
But
to
if I have
do.
a tenant that all of a sudden starts putting something in there that they're not supposed to put in there, you know, we've discussed, are we gonna put number 1, 2, 3 on barrels and they would know where the barrels
Right, there are
would
some
go?
options, Counselor.
Yeah,
And I
but-
agree with you, but
But
as,
then what are we gonna lock them? Because then I don't know if the second floor is putting something illegal in the third floor. The bottom line is people lack responsibility, not all, but some people lack responsibility and they lack pride in our community. Because trash is all over the place. I mean, we spoke today about mattresses and this and that were put in a location that nobody even lives there. So, you know, there's a person who's not wanting to pay to remove it or,
so there's an instance where
Yeah.
we can point out that we don't, our last onus isn't to fine. We don't want to fine, we don't want to cite people, that's the last thing we want to do. We want them to work with us. So with the, you know, the mattresses dumped in front of somebody's property that they don't know where they came from. I mean, we really will ask, are you sure it didn't come from your property? Wasn't one of your tenants? Nope, it gets dropped here. I don't know where it came from. It's not ours. It didn't come from my house. We don't argue with them. We don't send them a violation where rightfully we could, because it's in front of their property. But we don't. We pick it up, and unfortunately, we eat that cost. You know, but that's the point. We don't try to hurt people. We try to work with them to get them to do the right thing.
did I misunderstand you? But I thought you said that the property owners that you have worked with have been helpful in working with the city.
They're helpful with working with the city to identify the tenants.
Okay.
But unfortunately, those tenants continue to repeat offend because there is nothing that we have that has any teeth to come
So if
to
I
really
have a
stick to
tenant
them.
and I'm willing to help you, and that tenant keeps reoffending, I'm gonna now be the one to, what else do you want that homeowner to do to rectify, should I evict that person?
I would say that maybe there's some language that needs to be, and again, we need to really start to look at this along the long term, because maybe there's some language that can be written into the leases that they sign that states, you know, if the city receives a fine due to the fact that you've put illegal items out on this curbside or in the bins, you'll be responsible for said fine. Things like that. But I think there are many steps that the homeowners can take that will help us in this. And again, it's not citywide as far as all of the properties we
Right.
have. There's a contingent of nuisance properties that we have issues with. And they're generally in the tighter, more tenement-based neighborhoods, okay? So the 3 families, the 6 families, the tighter neighborhoods where you're seeing those as far as those types of houses as opposed to single family. We really know where we need to target this. But we need homeowners to really be responsible for it. And you and I have talked about this. We've said it a lot. I mean, in this city,
How many years
I
have
grew
I
up
been
in.
here? We've talked about trash.
I've grown up in this city. I've grown up in this city, and honestly, there is still some remaining. But the days of the Vavo on the first floor, T. Joe on the second, Tia Maria on the third are over. There are still family houses like that within the city, but the majority of tenement owners are owners for profit. Whether it's because the rent they collect helps to pay the mortgage on the house they live in if it's owner occupied, or it's a tenement house that helps them pay their mortgage in another community even, that they just, own these properties, and it's a moneymaker. It's a retirement investment. It's a business. And just like any other business, in my opinion, the owners of those businesses are responsible for not only their employees, but the conduct of people within those businesses. So that's where I'm coming from with it. It isn't the intent to hurt anybody. I understand Mr. Ferry's opinion as far as, and those are the ones that we continue to work with. So an owner-occupied landlord that lives on the property, does the right thing, somebody slips up, he gets a violation or a letter in the mail, and then we work with him to try to get it straightened out. And I'd say 95% of the time, those original citations are withdrawn, and we work with the homeowner. We will go back and check up on them and try to make sure that things are still okay. But again, with 4 people in all the properties, we cannot continue to backtrack. We have to be able to send the fine, work with the homeowner. If it goes away, it goes away. We move on to new locations. If we happen to come back to that neighborhood in another month or 2 and we see that that house is still a problem, then, we may have to go to the next step.
I'm going to yield to give my colleagues, I just wanted to ask about who the officer was, if we have somebody that, that does that. But I'm going to yield to John. Mr. Perry's given us a whole lot of information on everything he's done, but I yield to my colleagues.
Thank you, Counselor. And I have to agree with you. I think that Fall River works with the homeowners far more than they find the homeowners. I've had people call me all the time. There was something in front of my house I got a fine for. I didn't put it there, and I've been able to call up and help them get that sorted out. And I think we go far and above any other municipality in that regards. I do agree also. I have a 3-family. Landlords that are buying them because they're running them as a business. They're making money, and they have to be responsible for the property that they purchase. As a realtor in my other job, we write it right into the lease. In my own 3-family, we write it right into the lease. When you have to use the bags or when you have to make sure you recycle properly, you have to take responsibility for your property. I'm just going to make a suggestion, and I know that both councilors are also waiting to talk. I was under the impression that our Corporation Council had drafted this. I just want to point out that items 2 and 3 are relatively the same. We'll probably give 3 leave to withdraw. It's the older one from last year. Item 2 is from February, and because it was from February, I was under the impression that Corporation Council had drafted the recommendations. He has not. I'm not sure who drafted this, but I think it would be a good idea after he hears and everybody gets a chance to speak that we could perhaps send this to Corporation Council to have him draft it, look through the ordinance as it is, and then write it up appropriately.
So propose?
Councilor, you had your hand up next.
So I just, first of all, I just wanted to say that the purple bag conversation that started in 2014 has always been about, there's always been that group of people that say that we need to educate more. When I was going through all the research for the 5th item on the agenda, I came across a lot of stuff that's already on the Fall River website. There's a lot of education already on the website. What I will agree, so I will disagree that Fall River hasn't produced the information. What I would agree with Council in Seat 8 is that Fall River hasn't been consistent across the board with its advertising piece. And to Mr. Perry's point, when you do take those initiatives to increase recycling, and when we start talking about the composting later on, and hopefully we'll take that same initiative to talk about in different venues, including public school and things like that, I think people respond to money pretty quickly. I think that's probably one of the biggest motivators that people will listen to when we talk about fees, when we talk about ownership of where this responsibility goes, people start to talk. We start to get citizens' inputs. We start to get people, on our social media, wherever we go, letters complaining about, hey, this cost shouldn't come on me. I'm reading, and I respect Mr. Ferry and his opinions all the way down the line. Whenever he comes down with a letter, I'm always interested in reading it because he makes good points for most of the time. I would argue though. There's a couple things I'd argue with, but one thing I would argue with is you said that contaminated recycling has been a problem for a long time, and you're saying that a place like Casella gave us 5 to 10%, maybe even up to 15% in some points, as some sort of cushion, right?
Correct.
But we, as a city, went up to 30, 40%, which is a lot of contaminated recycling.
Absolutely.
And that cost falls on the property owner.
True. Yeah, and that is correct.
So for someone like Mr. Ferry to say that if we switch this over and we take it away from the generator and go into the property owner, we're trying to bring that 30% down,
Yes.
which would ultimately be a cost savings for the property owner.
Correct. It would allow us to barter a better price with other end user for recycling facilities, and I have no doubt. In my dealings with Mr. Ferry, if there was an issue with his property and we reached out to him, I have no doubt that he would work with us to try to figure out what the issue was, identify where the problem was, and get it corrected. So those aren't the people. But you're right. It's all connected, Counselor.
Right.
If we can drive down our contaminations, it's going to save money in the end.
And that's going to
for
save
everybody.
a significant amount of money, not just a fine or a small fine or
Significant.
fee. We're talking about if we were able to reduce from 40 to 30% to 20 to even 10%, now your property owner is getting significant
savings on their disposal
Right.
costs. Correct.
Which, another thing that we're going to talk about soon as we have more meetings. But there's another thing I disagree with. I think the word "only" in this ordinance change, you provided nuance in your conversation. And when you spoke to Ms. Pereira and Ms. LeBeau, you talked about how you go to the.
Just a point of clarification, which
only?
only are you speaking of?
So and it's the third page in, and it's the very last sentence actually. Enforcement shall only be against the property owner.
Thank you.
See it?
Yep.
Yes.
So I disagree with that word only. I think that you provided a nuance to this that maybe we can make a change to this request in that maybe we need to have a sort of couple more sentences involved in this where the warnings go to the property owner about pinpointing the generator of the trash, and that would make it a shared responsibility between the property owner and the generator of the trash. In those first two parts, where you say, "Hey, this property is clearly in violation," giving you an opportunity to sort it out. Let's sort it out. If it can't be sorted out, as Ms. Pereira said before, I keep saying Ms. Council Pereira. Sorry about that. We will have to have a fine on the property. And I think that's giving you, that's doing essentially what you're already doing. You're working with the property owner in order to try to get to a resolution.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that, and I would defer to Corporation Counsel on how the wording should go, and at the end of the day, once things are said and done. But I would be careful with trying. It kind of muddies the water a little bit, Counselor, where you have two different people, so it could go.
Well, the final, after the final, warning or whatever you bring down the line, it does fall on one person. But again, if property owners start to go into their leases and saying, hey, this is what the city has in ordinance, then it's still going to fall somehow on the generator of trash.
I think what will end up happening in that sense, it'll be the landlord will say, hey, listen, I've worked with this guy, I've tried, there's nothing I can do, he just keeps doing it. I don't know what to tell you, it's not my fault.
And that's what you've run into.
Yeah, many, many, many times, yeah. As you said, I think when it hits the pocket of anybody, the wallet, that's when you get results. It's sad that it has to be that way.
Right.
That you can't have a respectable conversation with some people and have them understand what you mean, realize the effect of what's going on, and change it. Right. But it's unfortunate. But until there is that recourse,
and so I would argue, based on the parameters that you're just stating right now, I would argue that keeping the ordinance the way it is going to keep the contaminated recycling numbers,
Absolutely.
and it's still going to fall on the property owner. I think the property owner is still going to end up, swallowing that
yeah.
cost.
They're going to eat the cost at the end, when it comes to disposal.
Right.
The problem is, you don't see it from my house. So at that point, if they're not responsible for it and they're in another community or they're in California or Florida, we have, property owners from all over the country that own property in this city. And they're in the state as well. They might live up toward Boston or Somerset, Swansea, Westport. Doesn't matter where they are. If it's I can't see it from my house, I'm not worried about what those tenants are doing unless it's, rent collection day. Those are the properties that are the issue.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to get a handle on that. So they don't think of this and the contamination percentages when we're at the council meeting arguing about cost of disposal.
Mm-hmm.
Then they're not stopping and saying, well, I'm partly to blame for that too.
And
we
and
all
that's-
pay a
that-
part
that's
in
the
it because
funniest
my
part.
tenants aren't.
That's one of the
compliant.
most ironic parts about this is that you're being told you're not doing enough enforcement
Yes.
of this. You're not doing enforcement
Correct.
of this, but we have contaminated recycling. That you're not responsible for that.
I'm going to be frank.
Yep.
At the end of the day, the way this is set up right now, it fights against us. It works against us to come out in the end with a violation that will stick. It's working against us.
Mm-hmm.
If we want enforcement and we want these citations to be able to be followed through with and stand up in whether it be housing court or a 40U hearing, we need this language changed.
So in regards to education, I think that plenty of people have these kind of things in their homes. I think a lot of people do contaminate their recycling knowing this. They just, like you said, don't care. I agree with that for the most part. But I would argue that most people don't always know the cost. They don't always understand. I think there was an article that just came out just recently saying that recycling costs are about 25% higher now than they were so many years ago. And I'm looking at some of the comments on those articles, and it's all the city's mismanagement. And I'm thinking, like, I know for a fact that contaminated recycling doesn't have anything to do with how you manage the city or how, the mayor or the city council manages anything. I think it comes down to they need to understand that when they do that contaminated cost and they don't follow this, the cost is going to fall on everybody. It's going to fall on taxpayers and everyone else that's involved in this situation until we're able to have some type of program in place that people can follow and understand the costs at the same time. So I think when you go out and you make that initiative to educate the public, and especially in the school departments, and if you're able to get, recycling and composting and whatever other program we can into the school department, we're going to hopefully reach that education goal that we're trying to get to bring down the cost, because that's always been my number one goal is in all this conversation is to try to bring down the cost and not make it a burden on people. And they have the power in their hands in this situation. In this specific situation, the power is in their hands to bring down that cost. So maybe what's on us is, like you said, that advertising piece and just getting it out there and letting them know, like, we're at like 100 or over 100 dollars per ton on a lot of this, and it could come down to a lot lower if we just
We're at $133 a ton for recycling.
I want everyone who's listening to hear that.
That's included. That's included. So it's $133 with the transportation. So that's per ton to leave our facility on Lewiston Street and get to the end user facility.
And improving contaminated recycling can bring us down significantly.
Yeah. And absolutely. Well, where we bring it now, I'm grateful. The contamination numbers at the end user facility, our recycling currently goes to, aren't affecting us. It's that price. It's a flat rate. Doesn't matter whether our contamination is 40% or 10%.
Flat.
It's a flat rate, 133. When I say it allows us to barter a better deal, bringing down the contamination rates will allow us to go to another company such as Casella or Covanta and say, look, we have cleaned up our recycling. We think it's time where we can start to, go out and look for another end user facility that might be able to give us a better price, because we're confident that our contamination rates are better than they were before. It's still a roll of the dice. I think there's always going to be hot spots within the city where the contamination rates are high, and certain months our rate may be higher than others. But I think if we get that percentage down, then we're going to be able to get a better price. It might not be 133, it might be 100. And make no mistake, the recycling market is driving the cost up. That's the biggest significant factor. That's not turning around anytime soon, but we can get a better price than what we're paying now if we can do something about this. And I will, as I said the other night, not skirt our responsibility, whereas Councilor Pereira said, the education piece from the very beginning could have been better. All right, the pay-as-you-throw was instituted very quickly. There wasn't a lot of education on pay-as-you-throw program and or recycling at that point, because they go hand in hand. With the pay-as-you-throw program, your recycling percentages as far as contamination historically go up in any community that institutes it, because
Right.
people are trying to conserve what they're putting in their trash so that they don't have to buy bags.
Right.
So items that you didn't see end up in the recycling now end up in the recycling. I mean, Councilor, you can't get around it. We've had ironing boards, irons, electrical cords.
Microwaves.
I've had automobile pots, microwaves,
Yeah.
air conditioners in recycling bins. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, we need the support of the council, of the ordinance itself, the language in the ordinance to be strong enough for us to be able to make these stick when it comes out.
So the other thing that I think is important in this is when you're talking about the pay-as-you-throw bags, there's an EPA. There was information. It wasn't. I wouldn't call it a regulation. I would call it just. It was on a website. It's in the archives. I pull it up all the time. When I'm in conversation with people about this, is the EPA made a suggestion that multi-tenant housing wasn't the most ideal situation for pay-as-you-throw. Based on compliance problems and based on illegal dumping. And those were problems that we did have when we had pay-as-you-throw in session. So I'll bring that, just for your own personal reading, not for any official thing here, but I'll bring that and I'll pull it up and I'll show that, because I read that in the beginning, back in 2014, 15, and that ended up proving true in many cases when it came to that. So with that, I yield.
Counselor, what was that you were holding up in your hand?
So, this was when I was going through what we do in Fall River, and I was comparing it to what Cambridge and some other places do in regards to how they inform their public and the initiatives they take on recycling. And
Which one of those is Fall River? I'm sorry, I can't see.
Those
these
are
are both
both.
Fall River.
And where did you get those?
The website, Fall River
Okay,
website,
thank you.
yeah.
That's what I was wondering.
And that's another thing. You and I have talked about this offline. How the website needs a significant upgrade.
I'm not a fan of the website.
And that's something I was going to jump into. COVID kind of, got in the way of a lot of that. But I think now that we're starting to have the restrictions subside, I can maybe get my hands dirty on that too, because we really need to do a better job just with that website overall in general.
I agree with you. I don't think it's user-friendly at all.
Not user-friendly at all.
It's awful.
Hi.
You yield. Counselor Dion.
Hi, thank you for coming.
Councilor?
My contention and my position is there's not one person or one entity that's responsible for trash. It's everybody's problem. And everybody needs to play their role. The city has a role, the hauler has a role, the people getting rid of solid waste and recyclables play a role, and the landlords or homeowners play a role. And therefore, somehow we need to find a way to make everybody responsible for their part. And what I mean in that is, so the city has a responsibility to make sure that trash is picked up. But we also have a responsibility to make sure that the rules and the laws are enforced. We also have to make sure, because I'm under the impression that within the contract, Easy Disposal also has the responsibility to let the city know when there are people who aren't in compliance. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, if Easy, in this case it's Easy, whoever the hauler happens to be at any given time, if they come across a house, they have, somebody's putting out trash and recyclables, they're not meeting the requirements, they need to notify the city. The city needs to go to that property, let them know they're doing something wrong, enforce it, and it needs to be consistent and followed up. The landlords, I think, do have a responsibility in making sure their tenants are taking care of things. Years ago, the majority of the multifamilies in this city were owner occupied, and like you say, they were families. Mm-hmm. Today, what's the percentage today that are owned by families, that it's all family living in it? What percentage are owner occupied? What percentage are owned by people from out of town, some who care and some who don't, and what percentage are owned by absentee landlords? Unfortunately, when people don't care and you have an absentee landlord, that ruins it for every other landlord in the city. And those people definitely need to be held accountable. And the only way you can hold them accountable is by holding everybody accountable. So I'm thinking if somebody puts out trash, they know if they're putting something they shouldn't in their trash. They know if they're hiding a microwave. They know if they're hiding wood. I believe that. Most people do. Maybe I won't say all people. Now, isn't it true when that gets to where it's going, if DEP is there and that load is dumped and they see a microwave in there, do they fine the city for that?
I think they'd have to see it. Yes, it's definitely allowed by DEP standards to do that. Will they fine as for an entire load based on one microwave? Maybe not, but I can guarantee you if our if there was a DEP representative and they saw the consistent flow of our recycling material, they would definitely have an issue.
Which creates another issue for
Correct.
us. If they see a contaminated load, if they see, let's say the hauler is doing something incorrect. Let's say the hauler is mixing yard waste and solid waste, and they dump that, and when they dump that, DEP is there. What type of problem does that present for us?
That presents an issue for the city as far as mixed disposal products, I believe, would be what it would fall under, if I have the wording correctly.
So I guess I'm just making the point that we all have a part to play, and I think everybody needs to be equally responsible. The homeowners, the tenants, the landlords, the city, and the haulers. And if everybody played their part, and if everybody was held to a standard, I think we would do really well.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Council.
And then my other issue is, would you say it's fair to say in the past, because we didn't have enforcement, which I think is the biggest piece in this, because we didn't have enforcement that went far enough, we had people who realized, yeah, we have rules, but we don't have to follow them, so I'm not going to follow them, just because. And did that create a big problem?
It absolutely did, Counselor. I know when I was a kid and the parents were at home, I'd stretch that line as far as I could take it. If they know we're not looking, then they're going to take liberties they wouldn't normally. We've had audits in certain areas where we take an area that we know is an issue. And I don't want to point out any particular neighborhood in the city because I don't want to offend anybody. But there are certain areas we know are problems. We've done an audit in those areas, and we realize that the contamination is horrible. So we've worked with Easy in the past where we've done those audits. Now, for Easy to call us every time that they come across a stop that has something that's not right, I think it might be overburdensome or not realistic. And I'm not letting them off the hook. But what we have done in the past several times is work with them to say, okay, this week, this month, we're going to target this area. And then each of the routes makes a list of every stop that might be not in compliance. We get that list, and then the compliance officers go and start reaching out to these people. They'll put the tags, which we call the hangers, that tell the homeowner that they are in non-compliance for an item that doesn't belong in the waste stream. And then once that homeowner gets home, sees that tag, they call us. We have the conversation. We let them know what was wrong on their property because we've already been there. We've pictured it. We'll leave it behind. Our compliance officers go, take a picture of the bin and what's in it. Write the citation or write the letter and leave it at the house. Homeowner comes home, sees that, reaches out to us, get the problem straightened out, Easy goes back and collects that cart. Once that starts happening in the neighborhood, you'd be surprised how fast word of mouth spreads. And then you start to see the contamination in that particular area subside. It doesn't go away completely, but you see it subside because they know we're out there and they know we're doing it. And then that spreads to other neighborhoods. Other neighborhoods realize they did it in this neighborhood, they're going to move to our neighborhood. So proactively, they start to get things cleaned up, and we see improvement everywhere. It's pretty much amazing what'll happen when people know you're out there and you're watching what they're doing.
But the point is consistency and enforcement.
Correct.
People need to realize there's a consequence. They need to realize it's really going to happen.
That's right.
And that's when they generally change their attitude and change their behavior.
Correct.
Let me ask you, so would you consider that people who, or entities who are buying multifamilies, because as a business, they're buying these properties and they're buying multiple properties for profit, should they be considered commercial? I mean, if it's your business and you're
Yeah.
profiting, I mean, you have no intention of living here, and you're buying multiple multifamilies so that you can make a living, and in my world, but that's why I'm asking you, I would think that those properties should be on the commercial side, and therefore, they should be responsible, and they should have to get their own haulers. Or we find an equitable rate and say, if you don't want to hire your own hauler, then you have to pay the city X number of dollars to have your trash and your recyclables picked up.
Yeah, I know where you're going with that, and I think that's going to be a big part of the conversation that we're going to be having going forward with this whole trash situation. Right now, there's a certain criteria that has to be hit. Statewide, as far as the state, anything over a 4 is considered a commercial property. Right now, in the city of Fall River, we still collect 5 and 6 unit properties. So as far as we're concerned, and the way it's always been in the 21 years I've been here, or nearly 21 years I've been here, we've always collected those properties. They've never been considered commercial. Anything over a 6 in the city, to us, is considered commercial. And we have a significant number of 6 tenement households in this city, and I don't know if that played a part. Some people were here longer than I, so I'm not sure how that ever got by. But similar to what we were talking about with housing, the law says 4. Anything over 4 is a commercial, but that's not how we look at it in this city. It's always been collected. It's always the way it's been. So that's part of the conversation that has to take place. But to Council Pereira's point, and Mr. Ferry, it's going to affect a lot of people. So in order for us as a community, as a council, as a department to be able to do this, we have to stand together. We have to have a united front. So everybody has to realize that when the phone calls come and the undue pressure comes from these people, that we stand together and say, hey, you know, we need to get a handle on this. It's not just going to help you, it's going to help everybody. And remember that when the phone calls stop, because I've seen too often in the past, once enough phone calls come in, enough letters get written, enough people come down as citizen input, sometimes people seem to backtrack. And that can't happen. We can't continue to do that. So whatever decision we make as a whole, as you said, we all have our responsibility. I think we have to stand behind that and work together to figure it out. Even if some things take place or rules and ordinances are put in place that might not agree with some people, I think once it's in place, if it's approved by a majority, and we need those people to stand with us as well and say, okay, the rule was changed, this is what it is. I may not have agreed with it, but this is the rule. And not look to try to help people skirt the issue. There's nobody that can say, and anybody who's had experience with me that can't say, if you come to me with a legitimate issue, you've had a legitimate problem and you're seriously trying to correct it, I am not going to work with you. That's the method and means that I've always taken. And that's what I preach to my employees. If somebody's working with you, if they're trying to do the right thing and they're just genuinely making mistakes, let's work with them to get them on track before we go ahead and fine them. I do that in all aspects of DCM. I try to work with people as opposed to getting to that final process so quickly.
No, and I also believe that in general, everybody wants to live in a clean city. Nobody wants trash in the streets. Nobody wants mattresses in the streets. And I believe that if we can pull together and we can get this on track, it's going to save money in the long run.
Well, certainly will.
There's no reason why it can't save money. Will it 100% close the gap? Probably not. But any saved money is like creating revenue. I mean, you know, less expense, obviously you have more money in your pocket. Now, what do you think the viability would be? So we have the city. So, as I said, you know, responsible for pickup, responsible for enforcement, and responsible for consistency. The hauler, who has all their responsibilities. So now you get to a multifamily or a single-family home. It doesn't matter. Somebody puts their trash out improperly. I mean, do we use a system of, you know, a 3-strike rule or something? Well, first time you leave a note, you put your trash out, this is wrong. Next time, it doesn't get picked up. You go back the next time, it's there, it doesn't get picked up. They're not gonna be happy it didn't get picked up. Maybe the third time, they're gonna put it out properly, because they know that if it isn't, you're not gonna pick it up. You send the landlord a letter. You know, your tenant didn't put their trash out properly, they were notified, they were told their trash wouldn't be picked up. Now we went by, it didn't get picked up. Next time, not only is their trash not gonna be picked up, but now you get the fine, because we need you to help us get them to comply. Would that make sense?
My belief has always been a tiered, structured system would work better. Right now, you get to that initial big fine right away. People are less likely to pay that because it's a significant amount. So I think, and the first step would be sending the letter notifying them that there's an issue. And if it isn't corrected, a violation, a citation will be issued. That first citation, let's say, would be 25. The two things are going to happen. You know, you're going to get their attention because it's costing money. It's going to cost them something, but you're also going to be more apt and likely to get them to pay that. You know, because it's $25 as opposed to $100. Now, $25 is still a lot, depending on your situation, but $25 is more realistic for somebody to say, okay, I'll pay the fine, you know, mea culpa, I'll fix the problem, it won't happen again. Now, if it happens again, it's a $50. Now, you've already collected a $25 fine from this individual, now it's a $50. If you can get them to pay that, now that's got them up to $75 already. And then after that second strike, that's when you get hit with the big one. So in a sense, you've gotten them to try to correct the issue, and you've already collected 2 violations, whereas before you may not have collected anything. So I think a tiered structure would work best. I agree with sending out a notice that states they're in violation, give them an opportunity to correct it, and then start the violation process.
And also notify the landlord, so that they're in right from step one. So
Well, I
they-
think this corrects that issue. If we can get the wording changed, this corrects that issue. Again, to your point just now, if I go to a house and there's a violation in the bin, I don't know who to send it to. I don't know if I need to send it to apartment 2A or 1B. We don't know. So the notice does go to the landlord already. But then the landlord says, you know, I can't control my tenants. What do you want me to do? That's usually the answer. I mean, what do you
Well,
want me
eventually
to, what do you
everybody-
want me to do? I can't control what my tenants do.
Eventually, everybody will know who the person is who isn't doing it correctly, because when their trash doesn't get picked up, they're not gonna be happy about it.
Yeah. And something tells me that, you know, the same individual who may say, what do you want me to do? I can't control my tenants, would definitely do something about controlling their tenants if every time they showed up to collect the rent, there was another window pane broken or stair railing broken or, you know, trash left from a party in the yard that never got picked up. I think they're gonna do something about that because it's affecting them and it's gonna affect their pocket. But if they can fawn ignorance and just say, I don't know who did it. It's not my problem. I can't control these tenants. You know, I think that doesn't help us in any way, shape, or form. If it's going to affect them, they're going to take steps to correct it. I've seen it. It's tried and true. It works. If the homeowner is responsible, they're going to work to correct the tenant's issues.
We still, though, have to be very careful with those absentee landlords, because if we start leaving bins behind, we're creating trash within the city, and if they're not here and they're not coming to pick up their rent, so they're not even coming to their property, that trash continues to sit out there, and the same people who didn't follow the rules in the first place and contaminated the trash don't really care that the bags are sitting or the recycling is sitting out on the sidewalk. So we have to be very careful. It's a fine line we've got to walk down, because we don't certainly want to dirty our city either by forcing EZ not to pick up the trash.
But to the counselor in C8's point, at that point, the Board of Health could be notified and could go knock on the door of the tenement.
Assuming how bad it is and how long it's out there, that's correct.
So there is another step that could be taken.
That's correct.
So, listen, and I just want to make sure everybody's aware. For anybody's out there listening, it's the old adage, right? If it doesn't pertain to you, then just ignore it. So if you're a homeowner, a property owner, whether profit or not, and you're maintaining your property, your tenants are putting things out the right way, then everything we're talking about doesn't pertain to you. It's not going to affect you because you're doing the right thing. And the percentage of people who are doing the right thing is far and away greater than the people who are violating. So this message is intended to be sent to those who are violating the ordinance, not caring of what gets put curbside, and helping to drive up our costs for disposal of trash and recycling. So that's what this is intended for, not the good homeowner that does the right thing. So I want to make sure we're not blanketing
And in
everybody and
fairness-
everybody takes it that way. I
And
don't
in
want that.
fairness, what percentage of the people living in the city would you say are doing it correctly?
Well, I point to, let's just go back to the pay-as-you-throw program for 1 second. The consistent statement was it's a monumental failure. Well, to me, a monumental failure isn't generating 90% of the projected revenue. I think a monumental failure, if we projected 2.3 and generated 2.1 or 2, I don't see that as a failure. Is it 100%? No. Is it 100% success, complete? We've done it, and every single person? No. But a monumental failure to me would be if we, projected 2.1 million in revenue and we collected $1 million. That, I would say, would be a monumental failure, because that's telling you that more than half the people aren't. I would say the compliance percentages are very high. We had done some audits, which I don't even want to get into because I know what'll happen. Those numbers are bogus. There's no way we ever hit that percentage. We generated the revenue we generated with pay-as-you-throw for a reason, because there were many, many, many more Fall River residents that were out doing the right thing, buying the bags at the supermarket, at the hardware store, at the convenience store, at the drugstore, buying them, using them, putting them out. The problem was the smaller contingent of the population that just refused to conform to the program for whatever their beliefs and reasons were. In my experience, most of the time, that particular contingent is usually the loudest voice in the room. The Fall River resident that gets up, goes to work, pays their bills, puts their trash out on time, does the right thing, respects their property, respects their neighbor's property. You never hear from them. They go about their life and they realize that there's a cost associated with doing business or living in any community. They accept that and they move on. And it's the other contingent of the population that feels as though there should be some entitlement to free services when, unfortunately, for all of us, that's not a reality. I think everything costs money these days, and if you look at the communities around us, they all either have a bag program, a fee structure, or both. And because that's the way of the world, that's the way it's been. And I don't say that to anger anybody. I just say it because I know in the reality of my situation, trying to figure out how going forward we're going to handle this disposal costs and trash costs. We have to do something. Because otherwise there's no way to cover it. We're going to continue to be back in front of the council asking for more money because we're short for trash and recycling. It's just the reality of the situation without a revenue to cover those costs. And again, I'm excited to talk to you about some of your revenue generating ideas, because if we can bring down some of those costs, generate any revenue, it's going to help us. But it's not going to cover the cost. And it's a significant cost that won't be covered unless we do some really, hard soul searching and make some difficult decisions that people aren't going to be happy with. But that's where we're at. So.
Well, people don't like change either, but I think down the road, if we can get a handle on it and get better, people will be happier.
I believe, and it will be someday inevitable. Right now, decisions were made, and I say it because I'm dealing with it. The council's dealing with it. I know it's a matter close to your heart, but we're dealing with the aftermath of decisions that were made, and now because of those, we're in a financial bind when it comes to these situations. So I think inevitably, I don't know when, but I believe at some point Fall River will be back to either a bag program or a fee structure. It's just not realistic for us to be able to supplement those kinds of costs through the operating budget every year, because they're going to continue to rise. And we're making every attempt to put programs in place that will bring those costs down. But it's not realistic to think that we'll be able to do enough of that to offset and basically call it a wash, I'd say. That's never going to happen. The cost of disposal is always going to be more than the revenue you're going to be able to generate unless you have one of those two items in place, a bag program or a structured fee.
Well, let's hope we can get on track and make some positive headway first.
I know we're working hard too, Counselor, and I know you are behind the scenes, and again, as I said, I look forward to working with you together to try to figure out some solutions.
With that, I yield. Thank you.
Can I make a motion to take, there are three here, different sections. I don't know if you want me to make the motion on the letter from the mayor or the sections. I would take section 1, 2, and 3 with the trash bag, the green cart, and the paper, shredding recyclables. Or you want to take it from here? You want to say section 62-2 and section 62-35?
Counselor, I would suggest that we send the entire changes for Chapter 62 to Corporation Council. As I said, he hasn't
vetted any of
He
this
didn't
yet?
do this. Mrs. Sahadi said that her and the city clerk did this, put this wording in. So I would suggest we send all of this to the
Okay.
Corporation Council.
I mean, I'm
for
okay with him, the Corporation Council getting wording for the bags and the other.
I think it would be cleaner to send that entire
You send
piece.
it all, refer to Center Corporation Council.
Oh, excuse- Counselor, you had your hand up.
Yeah,
Oh,
I just
I'm
had
sorry.
and it's no
It's
problem.
okay.
I had, just based on some of the things that was just spoken about, if we're having a conversation right now about certain properties being commercial instead of residential, and we're doing this in the conversation, the context of trash pickup, does the tax rate become part of this conversation somehow, some way? Do you end up going from residential tax rate to commercial tax rate on some of these properties that we're saying are commercial properties?
I don't know if those properties, I'm not sure what they'd be registered as in the assessor's office, Counselor. So a 6 tenement, although may be registered in the assessor's office as a 6 because the law states anything over a 4 is commercial. It may say that, I'm not sure. But I know we collect it. Whether
Yeah.
it says what it says, whatever it says in the assessor's office, we're collecting it. I can't tell you with any certainty, maybe Mrs. Sahadi can, what the assessor's office have those 5s and 6 listed as.
Same.
It's the same. That's correct.
So, and then the other part of the conversation was, what do other communities do? I literally was doing a little bit of research as to what other communities do regarding the generator of trash in a property owner.
It's by far and above, the property owner is responsible.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact,
And
when
I
Paige.
can confirm that just on basis.
Yeah, no,
some of the
I'm
ordinances that I
sure
was
you
looking
did
up
your
and down.
homework, Counselor, and I
Yeah.
wouldn't even try to answer it if I didn't know. But yeah, I mean, and honestly, when pay-as-you-throw was instituted, that was part of the conversation. Because we had heard the same statement that was read in citizens' input from many other people at that time, when we were trying to decide whether we were going to, find the homeowner or whether we were going to find the generator. And that cry was heard, which is why the ordinance was set to the generator. And then when that conversation was had with Waste Zero, the company that managed the bags, they were shocked because they felt they didn't understand how it was going to work. Because every other community that has a pay-as-you-throw program, it's the homeowner. Because they had already realized through their past experience, you got to understand, pay-as-you-throw isn't something new. It was new to this city, but it isn't new. And it's been around for 20 years, if not more. And every community that they have, almost to a man, as they said, was not the generator, it was the homeowner that was responsible. So.
Yeah, I yield.
Counselor Dion?
I just have one more question. So we're going to remove purple bag from the ordinance. Are we substituting something to make sure that loose trash isn't thrown in carts?
It states, Counselor,
It has to be in a bag.
yeah.
A bag
City
that's,
shall collect solid waste and
It's in there,
recyclables
yeah.
from single-family dwellings and multiple-family residential buildings containing up to 6 dwelling units. Solid waste shall be collected only if placed in a green cart.
That's right there, two sections.
Only if placed in a green cart.
so that's a problem.
Solid waste shall be collected only if placed in a green cart. So nothing outside the cart is supposed to be collected.
No, that's not my question.
Okay.
You want it in
My
the bag.
question is, are we going to, I believe originally, it said something along the line of it had to be in a bag,
A-
in the green cart.
Okay.
As opposed to the city purple
Okay.
bag.
Correct.
So in other words, you'd put it in a bag acceptable for trash in the cart. So when the hauler's dumping the cart and it's a windy day, you don't have trash blowing all over the street. Because also in the contract, those haulers are responsible to run down the street and pick up all that loose trash.
It's a very good point, Counsel. Okay.
Do you yield, Counselor?
I yield,
Noted.
sorry.
Any
We
more
have
The
conversations
motion
with
was
Corporation
to
Counsel?
refer to Corporation
Refer item
Council.
two to
Second.
Corporation Council, made by Council Burr, seconded by Councilor Lee. All in favor?
Aye.
So voted. Item 3 is the same item, but it was referred in September of 2019. We'll be looking for a leave to withdraw on this piece.
Request
I'll
leave
make the motion to
withdraw.
withdraw.
Motion made by Councilor Dion, leave to withdraw, seconded by Councilor Lee. All in favor?
Aye.
So voted. Thank you. Can we have a motion to take item 5 out of order while Mr. Perry is here?
Motion to take 5 out of order.
Motion made by Councilor Lee,
Second.
second by Councilor Dion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Voted. Item 5. It's communication with the request for authorization to enact a compost recycling program. This was referred on June 23rd. I'm attaching herewith for your consideration and approval the following item request from the Department of Community Maintenance. And this is the second piece on this, a request for the authorization to enact a compost recycling program with residents to help reduce the amount of compostable materials within the city's solid waste stream. Thank you in advance for your consideration. Sincerely, Mayor Coogan. And I just also wanted to point out that, Madam Clerk, did you send me that resolution from Councilor Lee?
Yes, I had emailed it. I think I have a copy here also.
This item was also put in as a resolution by Councilor Lee,
I have a
and
copy
it
here
is
also.
in your Committee on Health and Environmental Affairs, correct?
Well,
Correct.
my resolution was based on having a conversation with the director about programs or initiatives that we can take to reduce overall trash costs or solid waste and recycling. So composting is going to be a part of that conversation. We may be repeating some of ourselves here.
That's okay.
In the
I have
next
the, I
meeting,
have the resolution here.
Hasn't it been referred, the last meeting Tuesday night, that for trash, that there was going to be a resolution? I don't know if Council Dion, I believe, put it in.
Councilor Dion has a
That it-
resolution
Right,
that's
it's
going
going
to
to go to
finance.
finance, which will talk about all of that,
Yes,
that Council Lee has been working on as well.
yes.
And
So-
I mean, just you know, that meeting is right around the corner. So obviously, anyone who has information or wants to,
For the composting.
yeah, to have a conversation about that, that's fine as well.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion, leave to
So,
withdraw?
could I make
No.
a statement first?
No.
Or was that too late?
No, you can.
No.
Too late?
Oh, I thought you made
No,
a
no, no, I
motion
was
to
just
leave
going
to
to make a
withdraw.
motion that it would go forward.
No,
Okay. So just, I know Mr. Dias had written a citizens' inputs that you had read earlier. So I just wanted to answer a few of his questions, because I know that was stated at the council meeting the other night as well. So obviously, Mr. Dias is concerned about some of the issues with the compost program. Obviously, it'd be handled, to one of his points, through DCM, of course. We'll handle it. Residents will be able to pick it up. And if there was a resident who wished to partake and couldn't get to us, as long as the fee was paid for the bin, we would deliver it at no cost. That's something we would do. We're out and about in the city all the time. It wouldn't be that difficult. Sizes. Yeah, I know he had mentioned in his previous letter that had gone to council that there are multiple different sizes. Well, the compost bin that I'm proposing is the most popular bin, and it actually comes ready to be able to be made into 4 different sizes. So it's a round cylinder shape, and that cylinder can either be in circumference decreased or increased, depending on how much you have. So,
are we able to see that?
yeah, at the bottom here. So you might not be able to see it on the camera, but down here you'll see a smaller one. You'll see it set up smaller, and you'll see it set up
It's the new age one, right?
Correct.
All right.
So if you see here, set up for a smaller size, set up for a bigger size.
Okay.
Okay, and then it'll tell you the sizes here, adjustable. So that's already been addressed. I mean, yes, there are smaller ones that are standard, and that's the only size it'll come in.
Yeah.
So there are multiple sizes, and we've already talked to Ms. Lewis and MIS about putting this up on the website when the time comes. I think it'd be premature to try to put something up until it's ready. We had done a compost program in the past, okay? I will be honest with you, that program didn't take off.
Right.
It took years for us to get rid of the small amount of compost bins that we purchased back then. Now, granted, that was probably 15 years ago. So I think people are more socially consciously aware that recycling is more important these days. Back then, when we started that first compost bin program, we were still with the little blue bins.
We
weren't
had
in single stream.
we had the landfill back then, right?
We had the landfill as well.
Yeah.
So that program didn't really take off. So I didn't think it would be appropriate for us to go out and buy multiple different sizes of multiple different types of compost bin until we see if this program takes off.
Right.
So we bought a smaller amount, and we're going to put that out there if it's approved to see how the residents accept that.
Well, I
And
don't
one
have
last
the floor
thing
yet,
on that, the cost of this program is covered completely under our RDP fund, so that's the Recycling Dividend Programs Fund. So based on the programs we provide to our residents as far as recycling, trash collection, items collections, what we do with our waste programs, we submit an application to DEP through DEP for the Recycling Dividends Program each year. Depending on the programs you offer, you get points for each of those programs. Those points equate to about $4,000 per. We were getting about $78,000 to $80,000 a year when we had pay-as-you-throw. I would get a check from DEP each year, and it would get deposited into an account that we have for the RDP fund, and that would go in. Since pay-as-you-throw has been abolished, we're down to about, I believe I got $38,000 this year, which is still a significant amount of money, but that's only because unlike people, realize, we offer a lot of options for our residents to dispose of many different things. So all of the funds that we're putting out aren't coming out of the operating budget. They're coming out of the RDP funds that we earn as a city based on the programs we provide. Just so everybody's aware that this isn't going to cost us anything out of our operating budget, okay?
And
It's
I think
all
that's
funds
one of
that
those
we've already
things.
had stockpiled.
Right.
I think one of those things when we get multiple citizens' input, down the line, people, have a lot of opinions, but they don't always know all the information of what we have as resources, what we have as an infrastructure in place to hold a program like this.
Yeah.
So that's why we have these conversations. That's why it's probably best to hear what we have and what our options are before we, go in on all this critiquing and whatnot.
There is absolutely zero chance that, I don't know where he might be getting that, and kudos to him. He put in a public information request. We provided him the compost materials. So,
Sure.
And he's socially active and he's socially aware. So, you know what? At a young age like that, that's commendable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I'm not sure where it came from, but there's absolutely no way any kind of purple bag whatsoever,
Right.
would ever be asked to be used in a compost.
And
bin.
I don't
That's a
know-
misnomer, and I'm not sure where it came
Right.
from.
I don't know where he came up with that, but again, I mean, I think in some cases when these topics are brought up, I hope this doesn't happen, and you get the fire started a little
Yeah,
bit.
no bags in use.
But really, in reality, what I saw in my research from the absolute best program that I've seen, the most comprehensive program that I've seen, has come out of Cambridge, and that was what started the conversation for me when I put the campaign together for this run, and I talked about putting the Fall River having a composting program. Cambridge was the one that shined the brightest, but it also received a lot of grant money and upfront money to do not just the infrastructure for composting, but also the advertising, which and I printed out a lot of advertising from the website. They really invested heavily in the website. So to Mr. Dias's point, will the Fall River website have information?
Absolutely.
If you want a great starting point, Cambridge's website is very intricate, but they also have a bigger program, and they have a program that I believe is going to have a lot more startup than we have available. Fortunately, and I look, and if you look at any of this information that I have, you'll see that there's only a handful of programs, towns and cities that are actually composting to a certain degree. There's very little, and Cambridge is the only one that I saw that has curbside pickup, and curbside pickup is that's a very comprehensive program that they have, and this right here alone, this packet right here alone is straight from the Cambridge website, and it has tons of information on what to do, how to do it, when it's picking up, what you can and can't compost. But to this pay as you throw question, and I'll address it. I think what he was saying, and he'll clarify, I'm sure, down the line. This bag, these barrels, they're a lot cleaner. They're maintained a lot better if you have a composting bag with it.
Okay.
But it's not mandatory in the Cambridge program, and it's something you can use a paper bag for. If you happen to have like a paper bag from a supermarket, you can use that, and that'll break down just as well. And it'll keep the barrel clean. And what they're worried about in that context, you have a lot of food in those barrels, but those barrels are very thick and very strong. But still, you want to be as clean as possible. You don't want to have any rats, rodents, anything like that getting into the barrels or getting into your yard or anything like that. So, I think that's what he was talking about in that. And I was very glad to see that the bags weren't mandatory as well. That you can get a simple brown bag and use that instead of a trash bag, but they recommend not to use trash bags, obviously, because they don't break down, they don't compost. So I think that's where we are in that, and I think just through the research that I've gone through, I think that our program was, because of the fact that we don't have the upfront money to do the comprehensive curbside program that Cambridge has. Towns like Newton, towns like Arlington, and you can have this if you want. I believe that this is where we are. As far as resources go, not to mention, I agree with the idea to start small, to see if we can generate a pickup here. It should be on everybody's mind. Anybody that's watching this meeting, anybody that's in the city right now that cares about the finances of the city, composting can be very substantial. Using Cambridge again as an example, since 2018, they actually did a pilot in 2014-15, really again to start it up. 2018, they initiated the program, and over the past 2.5 years or so, they've generated well over 6 million tons of food waste and compost that's not part of the solid waste stream. And they've been able to save over $1 million over the past 2 years regarding solid waste. So it can help us. I mean, if we commit to it, and it's something that we can really initiate and get going, it can be helpful to the city. Will it solve all our problems? No. And I would never sell it as that. I never sold it as that, even as a candidate. I wouldn't sell it as that. But I do think it helps. I think it's right for the environment, and again, we're talking about, quote, the right thing to do. I think it's the right thing to do. So I yield. Thank you.
Yield, Counselor. I just want to point out there's two pieces of this. One is the program itself, and the second one is the revenue that it would be go into a revolving fund. The revolving fund already exists, but again, this is something that I would say we need to refer to Corporation Council for the program itself.
So that would be the motion?
Yes, if we want to make
Well,
that.
I know.
We can make the motion and then.
Yeah, I assume other people have things they want to say.
Go ahead.
The motion to refer to Corporation Council has been made.
Second.
Made by Councilor Lee, second by Councilor Pereira. Councilor Dion? Did you have anything you want to say?
I don't know if it requires any more explanation at this time to people, for people to really understand it, or if we're just best to send it to Corporation
I think send
Council,
it-
and then after the fact, we can
We'll
get
have-
into more details, more depth, so that people understand it better.
Yes, I think Corporation Council will work with Mr. Perry on exactly what it entails, and then it will come back down to ordinance.
Okay, then I yield.
You yield. And Councilor Lee, will you just make sure that all of the items that you've referred to that Madam Clerk has a copy of for the record
I can just
For-
give her this.
for this
Yeah.
and for the last item as well, the recycling piece?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Motion is made by Councilor Lee, seconded by Councilor Pereira. All in favor?
Aye.
So voted. Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Item 4, Committee Committee on Ordinances and Legislation discussing a butters program for tax title properties. This was adopted February 25th. Just want to point out to councilors, this also, item 7 is a communication from the mayor about the proposed ordinance for a butters lot program that was referred August 11th at our last meeting. It's
So do
the
you want a
same.
motion to take both item 4 and item 7 together?
I think we can take, yeah, we can do that. Counselor, we can
I'll
take. item-
second.
Let me see here. Motion to take item 4 and item 7 together has been made by Counselor Pereira, seconded by Counselor Dion. All in favor?
Aye.
So voted. And if we could have, join us at the table, please. Attorney Thomas. The resolution from Counselor Dion, whereas there are vacant non-buildable lots in the city of Fall River that are foreclosed tax title properties and/or abandoned properties, and where many of these have been identified as nuisance properties due to trash, rodents, and neglect, and whereas the city of Fall River does not receive any revenue in the form of property taxes from these properties, now therefore be it resolved that the Committee on Ordinance and Legislation convene with Corporation Counsel, Attorney for Tax Title, Director of Minimum Housing, and the Director of Inspectional Services to discuss an abutters program to address these properties. And if we could have the building inspector and the Director of Minimum Housing join us as well.
They could,
Do you want to?
Problem.
Okay, if you want,
Oh,
that'd be great, actually.
you can sit at Inez and the seat, that way you'll have microphone.
That's fine. I promise I see you every day.
And the letter from the mayor reads, during our briefings, we have discussed the abutters lot program. This program would allow the city to sell small parcels that abut properties and put them back onto the tax rolls. The attached ordinance would allow an abutting landowner with the first opportunity to acquire an abutting tax possession, which is vacant land and contains less area than the minimum required to be considered a buildable lot in the city of Fall River. Regulations for the abutters lot program shall be promulgated and periodically published by the custodian of tax possessions. And I just want to point out that the proposed ordinance with item 7 was, I believe, written by Mr. Thomas?
No.
No.
It did go to Corporation Counsel, but I think after we get input, it does need to go back
Yes.
so that it gets the correct.
Correct. He had,
number.
Corporation Counsel had said that he has reviewed this, and he does have a list of notes on his proposed changes. So after the discussion, I would also recommend that item 4 and 7 together also go to Corporation Counsel. Sponsor of the resolution, Councilor Dion?
Yeah, I put this resolution in after discussions with Mr. Fiore and Attorney Thomas. This was something that he had explored in the past. It was explained to me, and I thought it was important and viable. You know, so often we have these these small pieces of land that sit for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. They're not on the tax roll. People are throwing trash. You have rodents. Everybody wants to see a cleaner city. The benefit of this is, you have somebody that can expand their yard. Maybe somebody can't have off-street parking. If they can acquire a portion or all of this lot, the lot that they abut, now they can have off-street parking. I mean, it's designated what can and what can't be done. The key to it is, it'll clean up the city. It puts properties back on the tax roll. People can expand their properties. They can't buy it, flip it. They can't purchase it and build a home. They're all non-buildable lots. And I think it's just a win-win. And at this point, I think best to explain it would be the gentlemen that are sitting here. And with that, I'll yield.
Can I add something?
Council Pereira?
We did this several years ago. We looked at all of the properties that my colleague is speaking about, especially when they built 95, when they built Route 24. A lot of the strips along the side were owned by the state, and the state kind of gave them to the city. I can tell you a few. One was down near Father Travasso's Park. You were involved there because now the city needed a section of that, and we purchased that back. Another one that I know of is down near the Weaver Street area. Another one is at the end of Beauregard Street. There's a strip there. And I agree, and we did try to get them all, but do you have a list of all of the ones? If this is going in as an abutters program, do we have a list of all of those small parcels of properties that are along the way? And have we known, we had a hard time last time, because some of them the state had deeded back to the city, some of them the state still owned. Do you have that complete list?
No. This initially, if I can respond?
No.
This initially is for tax possessions, and I was going to make that point. Right now, based on my comments 2 nights ago, there were 29. Now there are 30 because you accepted that deed to Walnut Street. So there are 30 tax possessions. Of that list of tax possessions, probably 5 to 6 of them would qualify for abutters lots. We're waiting to see on the College Park Road ones. So initially 5 to 6. In tax title right now, there's about 400 parcels in tax title. Of those numbers in tax title, about 95 of them are single-family homes. There's probably 11 of them that are undersized unbuildable lots that are in tax title right now. So if you look at those 11 possibly coming in, that's a possibility. There may be some in that 95 that I talked about that were single-family homes. We have probably about 40 two-family homes in there. There may be some that are undersized, they were demolished, they're undersized, but there's not an awful lot of them. Now, what New Bedford has done, I mean, my involvement with New Bedford was 24 years ago when I wrote it for New Bedford. In that time, New Bedford's probably sold, I think, about 25 to 30 parcels through this program over the years. When we wrote it in New Bedford, there was a substantial list of undersized parcels that had to be addressed, and that's why it was written. It was modeled after Boston's. What's happened since then is that not as many parcels have come in. What New Bedford has done is they've changed the name of it from the Abutters Lots program to the Side Yard Sales program, and now they allow other publicly owned parcels that are non-buildable to go through this process. Council, that gets to your point. That would get to the parcels that the city owns that are undersized, that are leftover pieces from takings, state takings, that may have been leftover pieces throughout subdivisions that could go through this. There is a process going on right now with the assessor's office to verify all of the city-owned properties. And what they're doing is, well, it's amazing how often they have to do it, but it hasn't been done in a long time.
No, it hasn't, because I asked I didn't ask Mrs. Sahadi, I asked the assessor
Right.
to get me a list of all city-owned property, because you know that I'm on the bandwagon of,
Oh, I
I think the
understand that.
water department buys
And I
too much
understand that, and it
land.
was-
And the list we got was totally incomplete.
And part of the problem with that has been, in their defense, they're using the state, the Department of Revenue tax usage codes. And what's happened is, in the past, because these are tax exempt parcels, there hasn't been as much effort put into maintaining the correct codes on the properties as we're making them do now. Not only that, but there is the ability in Vision for a 4th digit. Typical state tax codes only have 3 digits. There's an ability for a 4th digit. So we're going through that process now.
Good.
Where on that 4th digit, it'll say what department of the city has control of it. So that it just doesn't say city-owned property. It will tell you if it's a park, if it'll tell you whatever it is. That process is going to probably, in all honesty, take another 2 to 3 months to finish. Because what we're doing is we're also going through and making sure we have the correct books and pages on them so that we know how they came in. Because if we're going to convey them, the mayor has asked that we look at these things with an eye towards conveyance, to get rid of what we don't need. So to do that, if you're going to go through that process, you want to make sure that when you go to convey it, you can do it. The ones that are undersized.
I think it's a great resolution,
Yeah,
because I think Councilor Dion is right. If we can get rid of these extra, undersized parcels, et cetera, and give somebody a little bit more yard and they can put it on, I think it's great.
Right.
But if you're saying that you're not even at that point, we're gonna, to do it in 3 months, then I would say, well, let's hold off and wait until we get the information on how many parcels we
what I was
have.
going to say is, this is written to establish a definite process so that as tax possessions come in, there's an automatic process for them to go through that has them reviewed as to whether you need it for municipal use. If you don't, it puts them out automatically in an abutters lots program, so that as they're coming in, they're going out. What I would respectfully request is move ahead with this, let us make the edits we need to make. Then, when the list is done of other municipally owned property, then you as a
Incorporate
council
it.
Program, though.
could then refer them into this program.
Good.
Because once the ordinance is written, in order to come up, this package is basically the package I wrote years ago. They've changed a few things in it, made it look nicer, but it's basically the same package. We would need to create a package such as this to go along with this. That could all be happening over the next couple of months after it was passed, so that by the time the parcels were identified for city-owned parcels that could go into it, this was ready to go, everything was ready to go all at once, and maybe you're looking at October, which is when we're looking to do a tax possession auction to really do everything all together. I mean, that's the kind of timing you need. But the benefit of the ordinance, and again, it has to be renumbered so that it fits into the city's numbering correctly, is that it creates a process where a tax possession comes in. If it's undersized, it gets sent to as soon as we get the tax possession in from a foreclosure, notice of it gets sent to the council. It appears on the council agenda within 15 days. Then the city departments have 30 days from the date it appears on the agenda to notify the treasurer's office or the custodian of tax possessions that they need it for a municipal purpose. That way, we're not giving stuff away that we need. After that happens, after those 30 days, if we have not received notice, then it goes into the abutters lots program. It gets offered to the abutters. If no abutters look for it, it'll then go into the next auction. It also establishes tax possession auctions in October and March. It creates a definite process. We don't get a lot of tax possessions. That's on purpose. We try to get the revenue, not the tax possessions.
Right.
But when they do come in, it establishes a process for them to automatically move. So I don't think it's something you're going to be using every week, God willing. But it'll be there, and then you can use it, I believe, and I would defer to Corporation Council on this, to add in these other parcels that are undersized that you so choose to get rid of.
Plus, it would also clean up what we have now.
Yeah, it'll take the ones, the 5 or 6 that we have, it'll help put those out there. And the purpose of this is really to allow people to expand their properties. And where it has the biggest impact is in the tight neighborhoods. If you're looking down at the Flint, if you're looking down the South End, in all honesty, it'll have more of an impact in those neighborhoods than it's going to have in the Highlands. But the idea is to create off-street parking. The idea is to create some green space in the neighborhoods that's privately maintained. It'll get added to by law, it would have to add into the person's parcel. So it will have a little bit of a positive impact on the tax base from that view, because now you're getting a bigger parcel. Not a huge impact. The real impact it's going to have is on the condition of the neighborhoods, so that as the neighborhoods are being maintained, because these parcels aren't sitting there as missing teeth in a comb, the neighborhood value as a whole will come up, and so as a whole, property values will come up. So that's how it really impacts it, and that's why it's written the way it is. It's really to help the neighbors and really take control of their neighborhoods and expand it and add value. So.
Yeah, I know 3 people right now that have lots that they,
Right.
that they want. So
Right.
it's like these people are like, they're ready.
Yeah. So I mean,
Those may not be in tax
those may
possession.
not be in tax possession, but those may be able to come, if we finish this list and looking at the city-owned properties, those may be in that city-owned property list. What tends to
One's
happen.
on my street.
What tends to
We can
happen a
look
lot
it
of
up.
times too is, a subdivision is done, in a site, and I know of one particular subdivision where this has happened, where there's a little piece left off of a cul-de-sac. And it might have been because they thought they were gonna connect it to another subdivision or something else, and it sits there, and after a few years, the developer stops paying the taxes on it. It's a small parcel. I spoke with somebody today who owns a piece of property on Rhode Island Ave, right along the Fall River Tiverton border. I don't know that it's a buildable parcel. They've paid taxes on it for years because they didn't want the family's name advertised. Then they stopped paying. It's in tax title. It's in 18 heirs right now. We're trying to get it through. That's how these things happen. So sometimes parcels that are not being maintained, that look like they're little pieces, people assume they're in tax title, and they're really not. But this process could be used to help get those out, if that's the will of the council.
So for instance, I don't know if you would know off the top of your head, but I know there was that one house that was demolished on, was it Dwelly Street?
Right.
That would qualify, is that
That would
correct?
theoretically qualify now, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that parcel is, That's not, I don't think that's a tax possession yet.
It's not.
But that is in foreclosure right now. We talked about the parcel on Walnut Street. That parcel on Walnut Street is actually the back parcel. That's why it looked like a driveway.
William Street.
Right, on William Street, excuse me. That's why it looked like a driveway. Those, both parcels, 43 and 45, are owned by the same person. 45 is now a tax possession, so it's a back lot, it's 3,000 square feet.
But they could go for a variance,
You-
too.
that's
and
the
build a
thing.
single family.
Now, what that comes down to is, they theoretically could, because it's pretty much the same size as a lot of the other parcels there.
Right.
What happens is, with the Abutters Lots program, it allows a decision to be made as to whether you want to stick another house in a tightly packed neighborhood, or you want to allow it to go through and actually maybe get split up by all three owners that abut it and add to their yards, because that's how this works as well. One person can get it, but we always do in the regulations is encourage the abutters on either side to buy it together, split it and share it between the two of them. They would have to pay themselves to do that. If that doesn't happen, then there's a weighting process that's put through here where if you have no off-street parking, you get a point. If you've been maintaining the property, you get half a point. If you have, so we go through and we come up with a scoring system that allows us to decide if we have to between two owners. But the goal is to let the owners of the abutters share it between themselves, split it out, add it into their parcels, and it really works much better. So on a parcel like the William Street parcel, it is possible that that would qualify. Dwelly Street is another one that would qualify once we get it. There are other parcels like that, that really, it comes down to a policy decision as to whether you want to stick another house in a neighborhood.
Well, and I was gonna say, within this program, if a lot is deemed non-buildable and the abutters want the parcel, whether it be 1, 2, 3, or 4, whatever the case may be, within this program, isn't it strictly to add to their property? So in other words, I guess what I'm also getting at is, wouldn't they have first option over someone else coming in to buy the parcel of land, to try to get a
Yes.
variance, to try to build a house?
Which is why the abutters program works, you're right.
Right.
So we encourage them to do that, and I've actually, when I was doing this years ago, we actually had applications like that. Now, I'll defer to Mr. Hathaway on this, but if a parcel's been in separate ownership from the other parcels around it, it has vested rights. So theoretically, they could come back in, get a variance and do it. But again, you're putting a house, adding a house in a tightly packed area where you may not necessarily want it, and if it was being developed today, we wouldn't be allowed. And this allows it to go to the abutters, expand their property a little bit. You know, the pricing on it, there's two ways of doing it. When we originally wrote it, it was $1 a square foot adjusted by census tracts. New Bedford's now gone away from that. They've gone to, if it's under a certain amount, it's $2.50, so on and so forth. I don't know that I'm such a big fan of that, because I think a piece of parcel in one neighborhood may not be worth what it is in the next. New Bedford also refunds the purchase price once you add it onto your parcel. Well, it's a regulation and a rule that you have to add it onto your parcel. So for the life of me, I don't know why they refund money for that. Because you have to do it anyways. It's why you're able to get it for such a low price. So those are things that we could, we would go through in the regulations. And I have discussed this with Corporation Counsel. He's got some edits he would like to make, numbering edits, I think predominantly, but some other ones as well. And, maybe the best thing to do is to refer it to him to make those edits after you have your input, and then we could come back with it.
Now, through the chair to Mr. Fiore, would this also help in your department in terms of, you get calls to go out and look at properties, nuisances, rodents, trash, whatever. So this program, if people are buying these properties, cleaning them up and incorporating them into their property, will that help lighten a load on your department as well?
Well, it'd help in a couple of ways. Some of these parcels that would be eligible, they're still in tax title, the ones I know about. Occasionally, Mr. Hathaway will have to send someone down there to clean it up. So that's money that comes out of his revolving account that is unlikely to revolve back into it. So it would save the city some money. And also, yes, other complaints that we get about, it's not just rodents, it's everything up to a small wolf that we have to respond to in some of these lots. In a rural area like where you live, that would be more likely. But sure, yeah. And And the other issue is that there are a couple of lots we've dealt with that were purchased by a buyer who was under the impression that it was buildable, and then found out later it was not. And those people don't live in the neighborhood. And so all sorts of bad things happen on those lots. They become storage for vacant cars or junk, anything. Keeping that lot in the neighborhood is in itself a good thing. So we've had a couple of owners of unbuildable lots in court. Can take up a lot of resources. So a property like that would stay in the neighborhood, is just really not gonna be, that I can see, anything like a problem, that even another lot, as I'm describing, that's not overgrown, can be a problem.
And if I could add on that, to back up what Faust just said, there's a tax possession on 756 Second Street that had a house on it, house got demolished,
Yes,
right?
I've cleaned that lot
Okay.
multiple times.
It was sold by the owner to somebody who thought that they could build on it, and that it was a buildable lot. They found out they couldn't. We ended up having to foreclose against that person. The person bought it at a cash deal without having a title exam done.
Oh.
So that came in as a tax possession in fiscal '20, and that would be a parcel that would qualify for an abutters lots parcel.
Because they have parked everything on that.
Yeah.
And it's grown 4 feet high.
Yeah.
Trash
So,
gets caught in there.
So really, I haven't heard or seen anything that would qualify as negative in terms of moving forward with this.
it's a good program.
Yes, sir.
If I may, the lot on Second Street is a perfect example of why you would want to buy the program. That building was destroyed by fire, can't be rebuilt because it was multifamily, it was in a tight neighborhood, it's congested. That lot there is one of the best examples of, in my opinion, of having this program. There is several other lots around that is a perfect example. I didn't look for this meeting because I didn't think of, but the Dwelly Street lot, for an example, the thing I want to bring up that has me thinking. So Dwelly Street, I know there's a neighbor, I believe there's a neighbor, I've heard that there's a neighbor that wants to buy a piece of that. Well, what if there's only one neighbor? What happens to the remainder piece? Okay? We gotta watch the wording on how we do that, because that lot had a house on it. That lot had a single-family home. That lot was not destroyed by disaster, it was destroyed through self-neglect of the property owners. So, what I'm trying to say is that even, and I didn't check this for zoning, that particular lot, Wellesley Street, it may be undersized for that neighborhood according to our zoning regulations today. But let's say it's only undersized by 200 square feet, or 300. That means that we've now divided, it still needs a variance, the lot on Dwelly. But the wording that if we offer that lot, that particular lot, to somebody such as an abutter, we're gonna destroy the remainder of that lot.
No, that's not true. Under the program, if you're the only person that's buying, you buy the whole lot.
It's all or nothing.
Second, you can never apply for a variance on the lot. You have to add it with your parcel. So you can't buy it and then the next week claim for a
flip it.
variance on it, okay? And you can't subdivide off from your parcel to play with it. It has to go in with your parcel. The one exception where you could take an abutters lots program parcel and make it buildable is if you bought two abutters lots parcels, if you were able to buy two abutters lots parcels side by side, and they qualified under current zoning. There's no vested rights with these, it has to be under current zoning, then you would be able to do it, but otherwise, we don't let you split them off if you're just the only person buying it.
Okay, I'm assuming that I know there's one abutter, but is there two? If we don't have two abutters, one on either end, are we gonna divide that lot down the middle?
No.
And give it to the one?
Nope, that one buys the whole parcel.
Okay, then that's fine.
That's how we avoid your issue. So, the goal
If
here is
there are
to,
two people,
if there are
and
two
they each
people,
want to buy half,
Then
they could do that.
they can both, then they
Yeah.
both bid on it, and we award it to both of them, and the condition is that they have to pay for the plan to subdivide it.
Right.
It's done as an approval not required plan because you're not creating buildable lots. So that does happen. And that's what we encourage, is to let multiple abutters buy them. But if there is only one abutter, it's the whole parcel.
I think it's great to let Alan, you go to Corporation Council.
My
I
last,
figured it shouldn't take long. I mean, most of the changes I've already made, it's just to make it conform with our current ordinances. You know, we can discuss whether or not, if you want to tell me, it's up to the council, whether you want to add the reimbursement program, I can take that out. That's in there right now.
No,
No.
it's not in there.
It's not in there?
No, it shouldn't be.
I
No.
thought it is in there. I thought I remember reading it.
No. What I did is, the reimbursement program is in the regulations that New Bedford did to it.
I knew I read it somewhere.
Right, it was in the regulations. The ordinance itself is the base ordinance that says that regulations will be promulgated from time to time. And the reason we do it that way is, you don't want to make the regulations part of the ordinance because you want them to be able to be flexible and able to adapt to what's happening. So you can change those from time to time. But the
So-
ordinance basically says, a parcel comes in, if it's unbuildable, it's offered through the abutters lots program pursuant to the
so
regulations.
we're not emulating to a T what New Bedford's doing here. This
I
is
wouldn't
just a small
recommend that.
example.
No, we use this as a
Just
guide
a small example,
Yeah,
okay.
I wouldn't recommend it.
or
Okay, thank you.
reference.
What I've created, what I've offered with Alan's input is the base thing that allows the program to exist, and then the regulations get crafted so that they're Fall River centric. You don't want to adopt somebody else's regulations. You want to adopt regulations that deal with what you have here in the city.
Councilor
So I
Dion,
make
you
a
still have
motion
the
that-
floor.
Oh,
Do
I
you
yield, that's fine.
Do you yield? I just have
Yeah.
a question. This is for any city-owned property, correct?
Well, right now it's written that it's this is for tax possessions.
Okay.
So what would happen is, ideally, once you go through your list of city properties, you're not going to have more of them. Okay, it's a defined universe, so to speak. So the goal is to, but you may have more tax possessions in the future. So that's why it's aimed for the tax possessions, and then the council would then decide, after they review the list of city-owned properties, we want to have these properties go through this program.
Okay. Because there was a gentleman that had, I spoke to last year, he owned a property on London Street, and there was an area next to him, a parcel. It was owned by the city because it was formerly a road that went to the housing development behind it. He had taken care of this property for years. It was no longer a road because there was a giant cement wall built. And he went to former corporation council, former city administrator. It went to the real estate committee. It went everywhere, and nobody knew exactly how to do this. But this is what
This would allow that to happen.
Yes. All right.
And
would
that
allow-
happens from time
That
to
would
time.
allow it to happen if, like London Street, that's what you're referring to, London Street, goes all the way up towards Diamond. And there are people that live on either side, but if there's a city pipe or something going through that parcel, then they don't want to sell it. And the
'Cause you wanna
city
maintain the
doesn't really
easement.
know where all their pipes are sometimes. The man on Eastern Avenue, I mean,
Their issue was they didn't know if it was a paper road, an accepted street. It's such an old road that had
Yeah,
gone
I remember
back
that.
there. So
I remember having a conversation with the former corporation council about
about
that.
that.
yeah.
And the other part of this that plays out, without getting too much into, is on a private street, the abutting property owners own to the center line automatically. They own the dirt to the center line, subject to the rights of others to pass and repass on it. So if it's never been built, there's nothing that the city can do about it if it's not a city street. It's only if it's been a city street, and if when the city did the taking for the street, they took the fee interest to the soil. If they just took an easement and you discontinue it as a city street, the city can't really help in that situation. It becomes a private property issue. So with paper streets, it gets a little bit more complicated. But in general, as we go through this list, I know for a fact we're gonna find parcels. And I know for a fact that they're not gonna do any good to anybody unless we get them back out onto tax rolls. And
That's great.
it's a process where it can be cleaned. It's gonna take a little bit of doing, but it can be done,
There's an aesthetic benefit to it as
Oh,
well.
definitely.
I mean, yeah.
definitely.
Do we have a motion?
Motion to refer to Corporation Council.
Motion to refer made by Council Pereira, seconded by Council Lee. Any further discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's going to be item 4 and 7 together, going to Corporation Council, because we took them together.
Just this.
No, we're at 6.
That's it.
Item 6 is a resolution.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.
I need to leave.
I'm sorry?
Good night.
You need to leave, Counselor? Okay. Item 6 is a resolution, Committee on Ordinance and Legislation established an oversight committee to annually report on the finances, efficiencies, and needs of city departments. This was adopted July 14th. And in speaking with this resolution by Council President, whereas the city of Fall River is facing an uncertain financial future due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and whereas each city department should submit a report detailing its finances, cost savings needs, and suggested changes to improve the department finances and efficiencies. Now therefore be it resolved that the Committee on Ordinances Legislation establish an oversight committee composed of 2 city council members, with 1 being appointed as chair, selected by the city council president, 2 residents appointed by the mayor and the director of financial services, to provide an annual report to the city council and the mayor. And be it further resolved that such report be submitted to the city council annually within 2 months prior to the end of the fiscal year. Madam Clerk today had reached out and said we actually already have an ordinance like this that was added February 9th, 2016. I don't believe I don't know that this committee ever met, but it was a financial audit advisory committee. It shall consist of 5 members, 2 members of the city council appointed by the president, 2 citizens of the city appointed by the mayor, 1 school committee member. There's an awful lot of detail in this particular one, and I'm wondering if rather than create a new one, we ask if we can find out if this was this ever used?
I don't
To the
believe
best
so.
of your knowledge, I don't think
Not
so
to my
either.
knowledge,
I
no.
don't think
Just
so.
say, it looks at, if you look at section 2-370, the composition
Mhm.
of 5 members, if you read it, you have, just like you said, 2
Almost the
members.
same.
City council, but it actually has 6 members, because if you look at the next section, it says the mayor shall be the chairman.
Correct.
And/or can appoint somebody to be the chairman, which,
That's 6.
that's a 6th member, because the chairman is a member of that board.
Correct.
So one of these would have to go.
You need a quorum.
So what I would suggest is that we possibly refer item 6 to Corporation Council. Rather than coming up with a new ordinance for this, we can revise the one that is already in ordinance to make it work.
My only question would be, is he a voting or a non-voting member? Because if he's a non-voting member, it's a moot point, right?
These have different purposes. I know we're all speaking at the same time here, but these 2 have completely different purposes. This one, which I believe has not met, or has even been
Nothing's
formed,
happened, correct?
was part of the charter, I believe, and if you read the details of it, it primarily deals with the year-end audit and the auditor. This one is asking the department heads to look at and submit reports on the finances of their department and report back to council prior to the end of the fiscal year. So they are, I'm sure a lot of the people and/or, for that matter, the tasks might overlap,
Yes.
but the one that was created as, I believe, as part of the ordinance has a lot more to do with the outside, selection of the outside accounting firm and the audit itself, as opposed to working with the department heads to find efficiencies and savings within their departments.
Madam Clerk, can you find out if this was put together as by order of the charter? The
I
one that
can
you
look
sent me
into that.
today? Thank you. Then in that case, I would suggest that item 6 go on its own to Corporation Council.
I want to add that this was a resolution by the council president, and if he's here to, because he did sponsor, if he's here to have that discussion with, maybe he would say, hey, well, we already have something in place already. Maybe he'll rescind his resolution. I don't know.
Well, I think we sent item 6 to Corporation Council, and he
We'll go
knows
from
that
there.
this exists. Madam Clerk will let us know if this was specific to the charter and needs to remain separate. And if it was specific to the charter and it hasn't happened, then that's also an issue.
Right. I yield.
So we have a motion to send item 6, refer to Corporation Council.
Motion made.
Motion made by Counselor Lee, seconded by Counselor Dion.
Second.
Discussion? Counselor Dion?
Number, what is that, 8, yeah, says the mayor shall be the chairman of this audit committee ex officio, and he can appoint anybody else to be the chairman. So again, I just question whether he's actually a voting member or not. Because if he isn't, it's immaterial.
It only makes sense if he's a non-voting member, I would suggest. It can be worded better, and I can change that.
Yeah,
Well, let's find out, as Mrs. Sahadi said, if this was in fact put together by issue of the charter, and if it is, then it might need to remain as is.
Oh,
If it's
that's
something that
true,
we're not
too.
using, that's another issue.
That's another issue,
But-
but if you read the duties of the one that we have here in front of us, all of these duties relate to the audit itself and the auditor, the independent auditor, internal controls, the scheduling of the audit,
Yep.
the reporting back. It doesn't have truly any of the duties that the resolution that City Council President put together, which is really more of working with the departments of the city and trying to put together efficiencies and savings within their departments.
Well, to your point, Mary, what could possibly be done is what we're trying to accomplish with the resolution that Council President put down the line, if it can be made in cohesion with what we have already here from this charter. Maybe.
Certainly, I'll work with Corporation Council and we'll see where the Chapter 2 Administration Article 4 came from. And we'll start there and then we'll move on to what Council
How that
President
fits
is
in.
looking for within the resolution he created.
Thank you. Anything further?
No.
All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
So voted. Thank you. Thank you. You have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So voted.